Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today on presenting for impact. My name is Danielle Moody, and I'm here with my colleague and co-host who is zooming in from out of space. No, this is Presenting for Impact, and we're really excited to have a conversation with you all today about how we present better, how we communicate better, and connect to each other now that we pretty much spend all of our lives like this on screens. So again, my name is Danielle Moody, and I am a communications and PR professional. I go on regularly onto cable news as a Democratic strategist and host the podcast Woke AF Daily, as well as co-host Democracy-ish, both progressive political podcasts.
And
John.
check them both out. Yes, thank you, Danielle. My name is John Neffinger. If you've lived through this before, you'll recognize me from having done this. I am carrying the torch that when the banner, the legacy, something left to us by Joel Silverman, who goes all the way back to the very beginning days of Netroots. This has been a kind of a core offering of the Netroots Nation experience. And so what we're going to talk about today is something that we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about, which is how we come across besides the words. We spend a ton of time talking about the words. And just want to, the first of probably several times will reassure you that the words are important. And the words are very important, and we spend a lot. That's good that you spend a lot of time on those. But also, the world is a little different now. Would you say so, Danielle? How much time do you spend on camera now?
I feel like I spend at least 4 or 5 hours a day on camera like this, which I'm sure everybody else does. And we're now obsessed with looking at ourselves. And so it's important to figure out how we convey, how we're coming across, because a lot of people are starting work on Zoom, having never met anybody in person, or doing television, never having been on set before. And so it's really important for us to make these little adjustments that take the anxiety away.
Absolutely. I met a guy this past week. I don't think he's on here. I met a guy just this past week who I've been working with daily for a year and a half. And it's just, I just have no idea how tall anybody is. It's just really weird. Isn't it? Like, anyway, okay. All right. So we're going to move swiftly on to a little bit of we're going to start with a research study that dates all the way back to the olden times of the 1970s, just to make this basic point about how seriously you should maybe want to take this whole nonverbals, thinking about something other than the words point. All right. So Danielle, you're going to tell me if my handwriting is atrocious. Actually, it is atrocious. I know that already. But whether you can see this. Okay, so back in the day, there was this guy, Albert Moravian. He was at UCLA, and he had a thought about how we communicate with each other. And that thought was that the emotion that you express when you're talking to somebody and they can see and hear you comes through potentially 3 different channels. Channel number 1 is the visual channel. So this is, what is this? This is posture and gestures and facial expressions and all of that kind of stuff, all of that input that you're getting. Channel number 2 is what we call the vocal channel. So that's all this, up and down and then and vocal fry and all this stuff we can talk to that I'm doing with my voice right now, not being totally monotone. And then channel number 3, oh yeah, that's the thing we were talking about a second ago, which is the actual words. So you can see how this works from an emotional point of view. If you're dealing with poetry, sure, you can have a lot of emotion just through that one channel. If you're listening to NPR, you're not going to have visual, but you're going to get, I don't know, teary driveway moment, whatever. But that can happen. And so the question, though, is this. When you're getting all 3 channels at once, and you can see me and hear, hopefully you can see and hear and all that. The question is, which of these channels is telling you how I feel? Where is the emotion coming through? And the reason that this matters is, Danielle and I were talking about this just a couple of minutes ago, that we can email, we can text, we can do all kinds of different things these days. We can send reports and charts and graphs and all these things. Getting information from one place to the other place, never been easier. And yet we still schedule time to be in the same place or the same cyberspace or whatever this is, where we can see and hear each other. Not because the words going back and forth is such an efficient way to move information. It's not. But because there's an emotional and a social thing going on, because you can feel things and you can tell how what's really important, and there's sort of subtleties in how somebody's thought moves. The actual speaking, the actual human experience is still important. So where's that emotion coming through? Well, you might think, you know what, we can't do this because we're not we do shout out and game show if we were in the room. But I'll just tell you what I usually hear. Some people are like 30, 30, and wait, that doesn't add up. So, okay, fine, I'll do 40, or they'll do 33, 33, 33. Because I get what you're saying, presenter guy. The point is that it's all important. Okay, fine. And some people are like, well, no, we have really big occipital lobe in the back, the visual cortex. So that's probably more important. So maybe that's like 50%. And now what do I do with my other 50%? Well, let's just say 25, 25, right? Something like that. And this will go on and on and on until somebody will say, no way. Words, emotion, no possible way. And they will say like 10, or they will say 5 or something like that. And you can do the rest on the math. And eventually what happens is the group's numbers magically converge, wisdom of the crowd style, on the numbers that this Albert Morabian guy got in sunny Southern California decades ago. And those are these numbers. So where's the emotion coming through? 55% visual, which is to say facial expressions and posture gestures matter, right? Which is why we bother with these cameras at all. Make sense? Yeah, do that. And do you spend a little focus on that? Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of interesting too, though. That's also a pretty big number.
Yes.
It's more than a third, right? And you know, if you've ever read story time books to kiddos, it's, you know, but it's all in the vocal tone and doing the voices and stuff. You can do the math here. It's just when you have all 3 channels, if there's any conflict, now, ideally, all of these are saying the same thing. If I'm telling a happy story, maybe there's a smile on my face, maybe I'm excited. If I'm telling a concerned story, I'm furrowing my brow and I'm doing all this stuff. And hopefully all of these line up. When they don't, that's when you have red flags and TSA pulls you out of the line and bad things happen. That's not good. But when there's conflict of any kind, the verbal loses. We've always been in the, you know, situation, or we've certainly frequently been in a situation like, I'm so happy to be here today, says the presenter. And it's like, seriously? No, you're not. Thanks for saying so.
Which you may in fact feel like that after your 15th Zoom of the day.
Yeah.
That's not a lie.
We've been there. We've totally been there. So all of this is to say that this is what matters in terms of the emotional part of your communication. And then sometimes we like to put a clock over here and add a column and just ask the question, so how much time do you spend when you're getting ready for the big, really high stakes presentation, getting ready for this as opposed to this and this? And I'm going to hazard, well, Danielle, you probably do better than this now because you're a pro at this. Most of us, it's like 95% of the time here, and then maybe think a little bit about how you dress and take a sip of water before you get going. So, yeah. Now, again, deferring to the pro, you know a little bit, do this a little bit better.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, John. So, you know, one of the things I think is important when you are looking at these numbers, people get really thrown off and you start to focus on where you are most comfortable. And I say, as somebody that goes on television regularly and does video podcasts as well as audio, it is really important to lean into where you are least comfortable, right? And so nowadays you can say that if you followed during the quarantine, if you're watching MSNBC, you had Room Rater that would come up on Twitter to rate people's rooms and what was behind them, as well as whether or not their lighting was hitting their face in the right way, all of these things. And as time went on, people got better. For me, it is really important that I, as somebody who has resting bee face on a regular basis, it is important that I keep a light smile on my face. It doesn't mean that when I'm talking about something that is serious, that I have this, you know, like a dopey type of grin, but it's more so just a softness. And I am reminded all the time that when I speak and when I'm just sitting and listening to a host like this, it's good for me to just have a light grin on my face, because otherwise I look incredibly angry most of the time. And, you know, the other part of that too is, for me, I also project my voice, as many people do, even though you're in your office or at your kitchen table with your computer out, you want to be able to project your voice because it has us sit up straighter, it has our shoulders go back, it has our head, presented in a certain way. And so you want to be able to project. John right now is standing, I'm sitting, but even in the even in the projection of my voice, I can already hear, already feel my back straighten up. And then verbal is really about, ahead of time what you're going to be talking about. So feel confident in the messages that you're delivering, but make sure that you are not finding ways to distract people with either not using your full voice or not paying attention to your face. The beautiful thing, I think, though, right now about being on this type of platform on a regular basis is the idea that you are consistently looking at yourself, which is really odd and uncomfortable, but also we get to know our tics better. We get to know how our posture is and how people are connecting with us better. And so those things are really important as well. Not to pick yourself apart, but to see like, oh, look at me when I have this look on my face, or when I look concerned, or I look like I'm thinking. Those are just ways for us to become the human versions of the emojis that we send every single day.
Absolutely. The emojis, which you do because you only have the verbal channel, but you want to put some of this back in there. And it's true. When we started this work, I started this probably 15 years ago, and we didn't all have a video camera in our pocket, and we didn't actually do this. And so most people had no idea how they came across to other people. Like if you spend 5 minutes with somebody, you have a much clearer sense of the way they come across moving through the world than they do. That's changing now because of Zoom. And so if you have that RBF thing going on or whatever else that's getting in the way of how you're communicating because you just didn't know you were doing that thing, now you'll be able to discover that. So that is, I guess, good news. So the stakes are higher, but the resources are more there too. So I want to move from just the channels themselves to this question of what is it that we are trying to go for here, right? And some of this is already seeped into the conversation because it's kind of marbled into how we think about the world. But there's a nice rubric that I want to introduce for how we break this out, and it can kind of guide how we talk about nonverbals for a little while, and then we'll get back around to the content and the rhetorical stuff as well. So the basic deal here is the way we judge each other is based not on any one thing. In fact, it's based on a lot of things, but they can all be gathered together into two basic buckets. And the basic bucket number one, I gotta plot them against each other here. And some of you may have even heard this before. This is what we call strength. And strength is the ability, someone's ability to make their way in the world and impose their will on the world around them and make stuff happen. There's an abbreviation now, GSD, get shit done. That's it. And that's a combination of skills and capacities and maybe even physical strength or something like that, your capability to do stuff, but also your will, your determination, that you project that you're not going to take no for an answer. And so both of that, skill and will, go into this strength category. If you project strength, people have to respect that fact. And so I will do I always hear the jingle in my head. I didn't quite get it aligned right. But so projecting strength commands respect. So people have to respect your strength. They do not, however, have to like it. And liking or affinity is your other piece around here. And we call that warmth. So strength over here, warmth over here. And you can think in a 2x2 about this is where you want to be. You want to be projecting strength and warmth at the same time. What's tricky about this, though, is everything that I do to project more strength makes me look like more of a jerk. And everything that I do to project more warmth, because this is fun, we all get to be together, right? Isn't this cool? Makes me look like more of a pushover. And so there's a natural sort of hydraulic effect here where projecting warmth maybe starts to suggest weakness, and projecting strength maybe starts to project, what do? Cold there too. And so it's very hard to get yourself projecting both at once. And that's why we like to break down the vocabulary of strength and warmth, the nonverbal piece, so that we can figure out how do you start wherever you are and then navigate your way up there. This is, by the way, that's where we say you've got it, or Yeah,
The
charisma.
magic, that little something, that little something special.
That's right. And we, words fail us up there. You've got it, whatever that might be, right? But we all know it when we see it, in this case. So that's what we're trying to get to. And it's tough because when you hit the gas here, you're undercutting yourself here. When you hit the gas here, vice versa. Okay. So here is what we're gonna do. We are gonna take this chart. Yeah. We're gonna take that chart and we're gonna cross it with this chart, and we're gonna get a bouncing little baby chart down here, which is gonna be visual, and then vocal. Yeah, see, don't trust me with the pen. Vocal, and then verbal, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about how we project strength and warmth in each of these channels. How did that go? Did that go okay, Daniel?
I'm loving this. I feel like you're like the science guy, but with communications, and this is fantastic for me.
Just like, what was that guy, Steve Jobs? No, I need a turtleneck. All right, but before we go on, we kind of got to pump the brakes on this, because it's like, okay, strength and warmth, yeah, keep going. But there's a thing about strength and warmth. It's not just happens to be the kind of universal answer to how we judge each other and like, oh, isn't that interesting? And then we go, because what it's connected to is yin and yang and Mars and Venus, and an issue that we should probably stop and talk about for a minute.
Yes.
What do you think, Danielle?
So here's the thing, and this is problematic, but also just the reality of the world that we still live in, right? Where people are boxed based on their gender, even though we're moving into a space where we should be gender neutral, and that anyone can present however it is that they feel most comfortable doing. However, we know that particularly if you're doing media, if you're doing television or what have you, that when I talked about earlier, my RBF, that is what is put on women who genuinely try and project strength, right? We are looked at and we are called a myriad of things. And I watch it even when I'm watching the news and I'm looking at Twitter, and people are tearing apart those women who are projecting strength. And if you remember, folks, if you watched any part, because I'm a Politico, if you watched any part of the impeachment hearings way back when, you saw Fiona Hill, who just has a new book out right now. And she is a woman who was projecting strength. She was talking about how this country is sliding into a certain space, and she had this furrowed brow, but she was also very direct and clear, and I felt like I could connect to her and her story, right? So when we're talking about strength and warmth for people who are feminine presenting, I encourage you to recognize that you are still going to be boxed and you're still going to be stereotyped. And so be conscious of how your face looks when it's resting. Practice when you're with friends on FaceTime or when you're on Zoom, so that you recognize, if I look angry, it means that people are not going to be listening to what I'm saying. They're going to put up a wall. And what we want when we're communicating with people is for their door to be open. And the way that you open your door is by presenting this balance of strength and warmth. I want to listen to them because I feel like they understand what they're talking about. And then also I feel connected with them because I feel like they are talking to me and they are understanding me. And it's thinking about this balance that unfortunately people who are feminine presenting are boxed into. Men have the ability to be able to show strength and yell and be, loud, like Brett Kavanaugh did as he was screaming at his confirmation hearings. If a woman or a female presenting person did that, a no. So you have to still understand, unfortunately, the times that we are living in, how unbalanced they still are, but that is the reality. If you want to convince people, if you want to be compelling, you still need to understand what the rules are so that you can find the ways that are best for you to be able to break them. John, did I miss anything?
I mean, how much time do you want to spend? I mean, we could talk about this forever and ever and ever. I'm sure you could. Here's what I would say. Two things I would add. One is, just because you're a straight white guy, please don't do what Brett Kavanaugh did. That's not a good idea. Not a good idea. No.
No, that is a hard no.
Yeah, the line is upset. So there is a certain amount of anger, of righteous anger, that straight white dudes can get away with much more than anybody else. And Kavanaugh went actually past that line and needed Lindsey Graham of all people somehow to anyway. Never mind. That anger generally can be a show of strength, but if you think about it, stern is really powerful, right? Mm-hmm. Stern is there's something wrong, and you're going to state that very sorry, we're going to get to nonverbal vocabulary. We're going to state that very clearly, that is not okay. But if you stop at stern before you get to upset, you're strong, you're in control, you're right? Like you are deciding to convey, this is how I feel. If you're upset and you seem upset, that means somebody got under your skin. And that is actually a weakness there. You're showing weakness. And so I did, like, please don't go, not like you were about to do a Kavanaugh. Who's going to pull a Kavanaugh? But anyway, but that upset line, if you think about stern, you can go there, firm. Once you get past that, very bad, please don't go. So that would be like my main thing that I would offer there. And the other thing, you talked about how basically working with the world as you find it, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're talking about here. And I do a lot of work with Emily's List and Emily's List candidates. And one of the key insights that comes from research, Tori Bruskel at Yale did some fantastic research on this. One of the key findings is that if as a woman, but if you, as a woman, you talk about your concern for the welfare of the group and the group endeavor and the group enterprise, if you foreground that very actively, then it helps old school, traditionalist, misogynistic men and women to understand your motivation in a sympathetic way. Because guess what? Here is our female stereotypical quadrant, nurturing and warm and all that kind of stuff. And here is our strong, conquering male stereotypic thing. But guess what's a part of this is taking care of others and taking care of the group. And so if you're asserting yourself in a professional context, it sometimes doesn't hurt to just throw in there that what's motivating you is not your own personal achievement, which we would never begrudge a man, but just that your concern is that we get the right outcome for everybody. And when you're focused on that, people, even the old school people cut you more slack. So that's a good one to throw in.
The other thing that I would tack on to this as well is that we can't leave race out of the conversation. And John so eloquently said, straight, white, angry men can get away with a lot of things, right? That is not the case, unfortunately, still for people of color and people that exist at the intersection of multiple identities. And so, again, understanding those stereotypes. When I go on any kind of show, I always think about the fact that, what television would love? The angry Black woman. There is no other trope that they love more. And so when I'm talking about issues, though, that are incredibly upsetting and frustrating, it's thinking about how do I deliver this in a way that shows passion, right? That shows frustration, that shows that sternness, but also doesn't move into and doesn't play into the stereotype of the angry Black woman, because then every message, everything that I'm trying to convey will be moot at that point. So yeah. It's the unfortunate part and of the reality of the world that we live in, that people who exist at multiple marginalized communities and intersections have to walk a finer balance than everyone else does.
Absolutely. I would throw in one bit of good news for intersectionality and the direction that the world is moving. If you think about who lives up here in the upper right quadrant that projects both strength and warmth undeniably, there are some white guys. And there's Mandela and MLK. There's also Oprah. Oprah is one of the first people who come to mind when you start to think about that. We've heard Beyonce, we've heard but Michelle Obama definitely used to occupy that space as well. And we could talk offline about some of the things that she did to adjust when she first became a public figure. She used to be associated with the term fierce, right? She was somehow fierce, and she was managed through some combination of visual cues to soften that a little bit, and she landed up there as well. So it's possible to do. Ann Richards, white lady, happens. It's possible. So everybody can make it up there, but everybody's going to have a slightly different journey
Yes.
to get there because of where you start, because you start with different stereotypes. So, all right, is that, I don't know if that's like, okay, good, check the box, or like, I need to go soak that in and take a long walk in a hot bath now. All right, but we're just going to keep going on. That's how it is. So here's what I want to do now. I want to fill in these hastily constructed cells in our chart here and walk through how it is that you project strength and warmth visually and vocally. And then we're going to actually talk about the words and the rhetorical strategies, because this is about communication. That's mostly what we think about. Okay. All right, fine. So visual strength. How do you suppose, and this is where we're supposed to be, can we use the chat for this? How do you suppose that you do? Oh, Joshua Johnson, excellent. You're a little bit ahead. Strength, visual strength. Any guesses? All right, this is where I cannot see any of you except Danielle, but I'm going to invite everyone to now stand up like I am and join me in some altitude here. And here's what I'm going to suggest.
Can I do this? Yes.
You don't. I mean, if it's going to mess
well,
up.
I'm gonna stand up too.
All right,
I'm participating.
Here we go. Okay, good. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to reach for the sky, get as close as you can to the ceiling with your hands and also with the top of your head, not this part that you hit the soccer ball with, but this part here. And then once you've got that, I want you to hold your head perfectly still and gradually come down like this. And you can pull your shirt down if you just untucked it, but your head should stay still. This is you at maximum altitude. This is you at 10 years old with the pediatrician trying to get that extra quarter inch for the measurement. If you walk around like this, you will project a little bit more strength than you do usually, because normally very few people walk around like this. We walk around like this. And the difference between this and this is, it seems like, you know, it's probably less than an inch in terms of actual distance, but it is very, very, very obvious to other human creatures who are seeing you out of the corner of their eye, because we have these billions of neurons back here in the occipital lobe that interpret posture and gestures. And so the difference between somebody who walks into a room like this and somebody who walks into a room like this, not to mention somebody who walks into a room like that, right? We know what that means. This person is ready to assert themselves and means business, and it projects strength. So that's the #1 way to do it. The B number two way to do it.
B number two.
The B number two. Okay, B number two way to do it. I'm gonna do this. How am I gonna do this? I'm gonna do this. Does that gain me any altitude? No, it does not. All right, I need you guys to see my midsection. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm gonna have a basketball. So here's my basketball. So if you're following along, take your basketball, hold it, but I don't want you to hold it sort of at 9 and 3 on the clock face, more like 8 and 4. Feel the weight of the basketball and hold it kind of between belt buckle and belly button right here. And not back here and not around here, excuse me, you're not hugging it, but kind of on the sides like this. Okay, now my basketball is going to grow into a beach ball. And I'm still at 8 and 4, not 9 and 3, I'm still here. And now it's a beach ball, and now it's one of those enormous Pilates balls, and I have to move my arms out or else my head would be in the middle of it. So it's out here, and Pilates ball to beach ball to basketball to volleyball to softball, and now my hands are closing in on each other. And the natural thing to want to do, whether you're holding a ball or not, that feels so good. That right there is really nice, and you can do it. But I don't want you to do it, because here's the thing. Once you interlace your fingers like this, you're not letting go. It just feels too good. And so when you're talking in front of people, what will happen is you'll start to gesture, you'll start to thumb wrestle each other, or you'll gesture with your club or with your shoulders, and it's just not good, because you want to be gesturing naturally with your hands. So instead what we do is rock, paper, scissors. Remember that? So take your rock, not too fierce, so you can actually turn it up a little bit, and then take your paper and rest it gently over your rock. And here's your resting position when you're speaking. So here, right, from here, we're going to now gesture around, and we can gesture this way and this way. And if we ever see each other again, you have to stand in front of other people. If you do this and gesture, you don't have to just restrict yourself to these gestures. Gesture all over the place, but come back here. And what you will convey is that you're actually comfortable in your space. And that is a unusual thing. Most of the time you get in front of a group of people, even if you know the right place to clutch, you just clutch for 2 minutes, and then finally it's like, oh, okay, it's fine. and now I can talk, and now I can start to gesture a little bit again. What I recommend is if I'm in a room full of people and I'm going to start speaking from here, I'm going to come here, and then pretty much as soon as I open my mouth, I want to say, okay, let's get going, everybody, and just feel the space and know that it's fine. Okay, so what does any of this have to do with verbal strength? Well, I'm about to show you. So we all know that this is rude. Do we know that this is rude? This is rude. This is pointing. Hopefully some older relative taught you that. If not, there you go. But it's very bad in politics too, because if there's a still image of your candidate doing this, then they just look kind of like a jerk, right? So Ted Sorensen, who coached JFK, who Bill Clinton idolized, who we all watched too much of, had this idea that instead of doing this, what we're going to do is basically just chop it off. And now we have the thumb point, the dreaded thumb point. Oh my God, no, please, please, please. If you ever do this, you never saw me. I want nothing to do with it because this is an unnatural act. This does not exist in nature. It says, I watched too much Bill Clinton growing up. It's basically what it says. I'm a Democratic political hack. That is this thing. So please don't do that. Instead of chopping this one off, here's what I want you to do. Open them up and make open-handed gestures. Your basketball, and if you want to be fierce and ferocious and pointed, you don't do this, you do this. Sort of like a karate chop, if you will. And you can blade your fingers, or you can just do it a little bit more relaxed like this. Shake the ball at people. They will get the idea you are projecting strength because your palms are facing this way. If your palms are facing this way, hey, how you doing? Here's a plate of cookies. Come have a hug. That is not strength, but warmth. And so if you ever do the thing at the front of the room where you're like, well, all of us in here, and you give everybody the Heisman, don't do that. Just turn it. All of us in here. And then you have a physically different feeling sitting in that audience if somebody does this than if somebody does that, right? And that brings us back to our basketball, because 8 and 4 is not 9 and 3. 9 and 3 is strong. 8 and 4 is a balance between strong and warm. And oh, by the way, never go past 9 and 3, because now you're just, I don't know what. What am I doing? Choking somebody? Drowning?
It doesn't look great.
No.
it's essentially that.
It's way too aggressive. Yeah, don't do that. So there you go.
Quick interruption, John, because I want to answer one of the questions that is in our side chat that Ali just put in, which is, how does this change on Zoom? Yeah. Right? We're doing the standing, and we understand the Pilates ball to the beach ball to down, and that's great if I'm standing in front of folks. But if I'm on Zoom, right, where most of us are, and we're sitting, how do I maneuver in that way?
So I don't have all this space anymore. In fact, I don't even have a midriff anymore. I just exist in this little box right now. And so gesturing is still important, because if I'm in this little box and my body doesn't move at all, and the only thing that moves is my mouth, that looks really weird. I still want to be gesturing, even if it's just to wiggle my shoulders a little bit. But if I have a big gesture, I want to do it here in front of me. I want to go like this, maybe like this out to the side. And I do have all the space up here, but if you put your hands up here, go Google Crazy Eddie, you'll get the idea. This looks like you're upset, like you're out of control. This is too much. But this space you can still work with for a big gesture, and otherwise just keep your gestures down here. Go ahead.
One of the things that I will add too, this just is a way to transfer your stretching exercise in the holding of your body, right? To create that strength and the straight back. When you're sitting, right? We have a tendency oftentimes to what? Slouch. And because we're all like this all day, we slouch over. In order to project that kind of strength while sitting, but having the erect back, is to put your dominant foot right in front and your less dominant foot in behind. And you're kind of, I'm doing this so that you all can see. You're sitting on the edge of your seat as opposed to sitting back here. Right? When you're on Zoom and you're presenting, right? Not just, listening or actively listening, you want to sit on the edge of your seat. You want to have your dominant foot, for me, that is my right foot, right in front, so that I'm balancing on that. And then that way I can now have my core a little tighter and I don't have the comfort, right, of the back of my chair. So the idea is that I am now sitting up straight. So you go from this, I'm sitting back on my Zoom, blah, 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 versus this, I'm now presenting. And you can see how even my head changes, my chin is down, and my shoulders are back. And that's kind of, and when you're now talking and you have your ball, but you can see that where your hands are, you can be like this. Oh, yes, I totally understand what it is that you're saying. And you're coming back to this position from here. Did that help, Ali? You can tell us in the chat on the side if that was helpful.
Very good. And the other thing to point out from the chat, Joshua Johnson offers smile while you dial, which is totally true, right? And, you know, the Red Hot Chili Peppers recorded Blood Surge Your Sex Magic naked, I think. They thought you could hear whether they were naked or not. I don't know if I ever bought that, but you could definitely hear a smile through the phone. No question about that. And so that, if we just did visual strength, visual warmth, we already talked about the hands being here instead of here. But the other big one is no big particular mystery, right? Which is just, hey, a real smile. The thing that I will tell you about a real smile, though, is if you're trying to create one, please, please, please do not think about your facial muscles. That will end badly. What you want to do is you actually have to have a conversation with yourself about why it is that you might be happy to be doing whatever it is that you're doing. And so if it's doing something that you hate, like speaking in public, you can kind of make fun of yourself and say, I can't believe I got myself into this shit. And that's fine. As long as you're laughing at yourself enough to give yourself a smile, a warm smile, that's something that you need to do, even if you're talking about a really serious topic. At the beginning and end of your time with a particular audience, a smile says, hey, I know this was rough stuff, but I'm glad we got the time to share it together. And if you don't do that, if you don't get a little bit of a warmth note, then you're probably not going to get a chance to project much warmth while you're talking about terrible things. So that gives us strength and warmth. Let's talk a little bit about vocal just quickly. We'll speed through this. So vocal warmth, first of all, basically means use your entire range. Think about catching up with your best friend from high school who you haven't seen in 3 years, or probably, yeah, it's probably true now with the pandemic. And you get to be excited about stuff, and you get to reflect on stuff, and you're just empathetic and sharing and use the whole range. High pitch, low pitch, fast, slow, different tones, all of that mixed together. That's vocal warmth. That's sharing. Really, everything that you're feeling comes pouring out in all of its different variety. Vocal strength, very different, very regimented, and this is a very helpful thing if you're trying to get the pull quote, whether it's the broadcast or the print journalists even too. When you get to the thing that you want to say, you're going to say it with strength. And here's what it's going to sound like. You're going to be talking about all sorts of different things and explaining things and being friendly because you want to be friends with the journalist. But when you get to the takeaway quote, you're going to stop and pause. And that pause is going to make people go and wonder what's happening. And then you're going to say plastics or whatever you want to say is the takeaway there. And then you're going to pause again at the other end of it to let it sink in, whatever that is. And so bracket it with the pauses and then slow and low, deliver that point. Low pitch, not super slow, but moderate pace. That's the thing. And if you do that with a print journalist, what will happen is you will get a star in the notebook right next to that. And you'll also do it slow so they can actually write it out word for word. And if you do that for broadcast, guess what the editor gets to do? Clip at the first pause, clip at the second pause, easy peasy. They've got their clip for you, and it's exactly the one that you wanted them to have. So that's the super quick version of vocal strength and warmth without getting into fry and up talk and all kinds of things that you might want to mention in the chat, but you really don't have to if you're really not so concerned about that. So with that, we could shift a little bit into content. Do we have any particular burning questions? We'll have time for Q&A a little bit later. So if there's anything you want to come back to, we can do that then. But I want to keep going to content. And Danielle, can I invite you to talk about the dark magic of pivots?
The dark magic of pivots. Absolutely. So one of the things that becomes really important, I think, when you are being interviewed, and let's say that you're being asked a question or you're having a conversation that you don't actually want to be on this topic, but you have to understand that you are an invited guest, just in the same way that you would go into somebody's home and you wouldn't tell them how to move around the furniture. Imagine that being the same way when you are a panelist on somebody else's show, at moderating a panel, or wherever you may be, where you are presenting. And the idea is this: is that the pivot allows you to be able to move from topic to topic. So that's in really, so if I'm being asked a question that I don't necessarily, it doesn't matter what the question is. And what I want to offer to the host is, that's a really interesting question. You know what else is important though? And then I move right on from there. It is acknowledgement, right? I'm acknowledging what was stated, but then I'm presenting without using, just like I did, without using the word but, presenting what I want to talk to them about and what I want to deliver. So the pivot is a way for us to be able to offer, yes, I hear what it is that you're saying. And I think that that is important. What I also want people to understand is X. And it allows you, again, you want to acknowledge, and then you want to make your pivot into what it is that you want the audience to know, how you want it to be delivered. Those little small actions are really important because you don't want to come across as if you are defensive. Oh, that's not it. No, we never want to offer that. It is the acknowledgement to the host that I hear where you're going. I think that this is something too, though, and offering that person's name. If those, I would say, John, I'm so glad that you asked that. Here's the thing. This is what I want people to understand. And so I'm able to pivot it into the conversation that I actually want to be having. Similarly, when we are talking about how do you make those pivots, how do you make those bridges, bridging into the next conversation, bridging into a different topic, we don't want to stop the narrative because, again, we're working on a limited amount of time. We don't want to use words like but and become very defensive. The idea here is that we are offering something else. So you think about it like an offering. So here's the thing that I want to be able to express. This is what is important. I'm saying this and I'm making it very clear so that the person that is maybe washing dishes in the back and listening to me up on the screen, and they're saying, oh, wait a minute, she just made a declarative point. Something else must be coming next. Though that's how we say, here's the thing. This is what I want to offer. This is what is most important. We're using these phrases instead of but, also that would have us think that what came before was more important than what I'm offering next. John?
That you just did. Wait, that smooth transition that you just did. Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing. And then, man, people won't even know what happened to them. Basically, that's how that works. And you don't have to be abrupt about it. If you watch Republicans on the Sunday shows, they'll say, well, first of all, and then they're essentially going to assert that whatever it is that they want to say is necessary background to address the question, and they won't address the question at all. And that kind of gets a little old. It gets a little yucky. They can get away with it as long as you don't have to like them, and that's a fine strategy for them in that situation. But you want to actually start with a positive thing wherever you can. There is a handy dandy graphic here that we can use to illustrate this, and in fact, a couple of other things that we want to talk about before we get to. We need time for slides and direct to camera. We'll say a couple words about those, and then whatever else is in the questions, and then we're going to be all out of time. But so this funny thing here, you see my wonderful art skills. So this character is your audience. This is not you. This is your audience. And the point of the circle is that from your audience's point of view, from their point of view, there are two kinds of people in the world. They're the kind of people in the circle with them, and the kind of people not in the circle, on the outside. I'm not going to draw many more stick figures. But the idea is the people in the circle get it. They're their kind of people. They share values and priorities and maybe experiences and background too. But they're worth listening to. They understand. They feel familiar. So these people get it, and these people don't get it. We talk about these people being out of touch. You hear that phrase now and then, especially down the home stretch of elections. There are, in fact, pronouns for this. So these people are we, the people. These people out here, the dreaded they. You know about them, don't you? That's them. Them are outside the circle. So there's a very tribal thing going on here if you hadn't noticed that. Now, when you first show up, if it's not 110% clear that you're already in here, your first job as a communicator is to establish, no, I'm not out here. I'm in there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do that, you're not worth listening to. And the tricky thing about this, and this is good because we're smart people, because this is a tricky intellectual exercise, is how do you validate what's going on in here a little bit without disagreeing with your own position and being dishonest and throwing away an argument, right? That's not what we're talking about doing. But this is about validating not the beliefs, but the feelings. The feelings are valid. The feelings of folks in there. And yeah, maybe the feelings are attached to some things that not so valid. Don't validate any of that. So this is a tricky thing to figure out. How do you define the common ground there? How can you articulate that in a way that you can say it forthrightly? I believe in that we have this shared concern. We all think and feel that. Finish that sentence. Or you're exactly right that, this is a great one. You're exactly right that, right? So you're not exactly right about all that crazy shit you said, but that point, and now I'm going to define what that was. And now we have at least a little bit of common ground and we can work from there. So this getting in the circle exercise leads to a version, the kind of nice version of what Danielle was saying before, where you do, first of all, you affirm that there was something cool about that question, that I'm right there with you. And now I'm going to do the bridge, and just exactly like Danielle said, bridge without the dreaded but. But is the ejection button from the circle, right? You did all this good affirming to get yourself in there, and then you're like, but, and people are like, oh, okay, you were just blowing smoke up my ass, and now you're going to tell me what you really think.
Exactly.
Okay, the hell with you, right? But if you do it without the but, if you use a nice, here's the thing, or the thing is, then you're still in here, and you can actually convince somebody of something. So there's your ABC. Did anybody catch that? Okay. There's your consultant speak version of how to do that particular piece. And there's a couple other things about this circle and this concept of being their kind of people. The number one way to get into the circle, the way to do this best of all, is frankly just to tell a story that they can relate to or see themselves in. Danielle, what's your favorite kind of story? You do this really well.
The thing that I love the most, and people feel oftentimes when we watch politicians and they tell us, right, on the campaign trail, well, I talked to Linda in Wisconsin, and let me tell you about how Linda is faring, right? That's their version of the story that they want to tell to seem relatable. What I love to do instead is that we need to be able to use, who do we talk to on a regular basis? Our family, our friends, and our colleagues. That to me is considered field research when we are talking. It is your anecdotal conversations that allow you to be informed of other people's opinions. And we all know, particularly now, that our families have lots of different opinions, right? And so when I am delivering a point or whatever, I'll say, I was speaking with my mother the other day. I was having a conversation with my younger cousin who is in Generation Z, right? Who is a member. Then I am now relatable, and I'm using what? Our own stories, our own families, our own friends that everyone has, right? As our field research, as the people that we are most connected to. And being able to tell those stories, and John will talk about this, those stories are important because they show a shared connection that we have with one another. And it's something that everybody can see. Yeah, you know what? I had a really difficult conversation with my uncle about vaccinations. And, much like a lot of members of our family right now, these are the conversations that we need to be having. And he's hesitant. And let me explain to you why. And now all of a sudden, everybody's just like, yes, I too have that uncle. Yes, I too have had that experience. And that's how you stay in the circle that John is referencing and talking about. For me, also, one of the things that I do as well, aside from using family and friends, I'm also a podcaster, so I can talk about my audience that I'm engaging with all of the time. But if you're not a host of a show, what are you hosting? Your Instagram platform, your Facebook, well, sometimes, your Twitter. Those are the conversations that you're having people. So you can say, you know, these are the stories that you want to best connect to. You don't have to be an expert with all of your data points, but what you want to do is make people feel like they're being seen and heard.
Now, the other thing that's fantastic about families and friends stories, and just to be clear, Danielle would never, ever do this, but they are non-falsifiable, by which a fancy way to say you can kind of make them up a little bit, like now and then. You know, Ronald Reagan, somebody once tried to fact check him on something god awful and racist he once just said, and he said to his aide, "It's okay, David. They know what I mean." Right. And as horrible as that may have been, and think of all the damage that's ensued, it is still something that we can do. You can tell a story that didn't actually happen, either by saying it was your family and friends, or you don't even have to lie about it. You say, so imagine if you're a 50-year-old guy and you used to work as a machinist in a shop, and whatever the issue is that you're trying to make a point about, if you know how it works, tell a story of how it works instead of giving me the facts and figures. Put me in some dude's shoes or some person's shoes who is going to be experiencing the emotional fallout of that issue. And I'm going to understand that on a much more visceral level than however many stats and reports you can throw at me. So just using the word imagine, or so if you're that launches you into a world of your imagination. But as long as it sounds and feels true and tells somebody something about the issue you're talking about, you're doing really good work there. So that is how we call it speaking in story, and definitely encourage you to make that part of your everyday communication. Also, one last thing about story. It's remember that black magic stuff we were talking about a second ago, how you dodge the question and nobody even knows it happened. There's actually some interesting science on that. Just like you have a limited amount of working memory, like, you know, I said phone numbers are 7 digits long. There's a limited amount of working memory that in which people can remember the question that was asked, and they're comparing your answer as you begin to deliver it. So about 7 seconds into your answer, nobody remembers the question. Hey, and you're free. So you just need your first 7 seconds of your answer to sound like they might be responsive to the question. And one of the best ways to do that is, you know, it's funny you asked that, because just last week I was talking to a friend of mine, and blah, 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 and that's probably 5.5 right there, right? And then if it's something to do with the topic, you're probably pulled in. You're welcome. Okay. So we have maybe questions in the chat. We want to definitely talk about Zoom. We want to talk about maybe Zoom and slide decks, and maybe direct to camera in our dwindling minutes and whatever else is in the chat. So Danielle, do you want to start us? Pick one of those.
I'm going to pick one of the things in the chat because I want to quickly, before we go into the on-camera setup, I want to answer Martha's question, which is no, you don't want to dodge the question, because then that seems as if you are not prepared for what is coming your way. You want to pivot to the thing that you want to talk about. Dodging the question is completely ignoring it was asked, right? You acknowledge, as we went through the ABC, you acknowledge that the question was asked, and then you say, you know, thank you for that question. And also, here's the thing, right? And that is it's not a dodge. That is what we refer to as the pivot, as the bridge into what it is you truly want to convey, right? Yeah, so you want to make sure of that.
Call that a dodge? Sure. But Danielle's point, just to be really clear about that, is you want to acknowledge the question and begin where the question leaves off and be responsive to that. If you're not, you're just a jerk. You will not get invited back on that.
You will not. Yeah.
And that's why it takes a little doing to structure your answer in a way that says what you want to say, not what they're asking you, but starting from where the question leaves off. Very good point. Excellent. Okay, so should we do Zoom? You want to do Zoom?
Yes. So let's do Zoom setup really quick, right? When we are talking, so for me right now, I'm going to pull this to the side so that you can see. One of the best ways to look good on camera is to get a handy dandy ring light. If you do not have a ring light, order one. They are super cheap. And they have multiple settings that allow the light to be coming into your face. There's nothing more frustrating to me than being on Zoom with people who have very poor lighting. You want your face to be lit up. You want to be in a position in your home or in your office that allows the light to be coming into your face. If the light, like right now, is also behind me, then you also want to make sure that you have light coming above you as well as towards your face. So that is just like, for instance, just with lighting. The other thing that I will say is have some visual interests that are behind you, not clutter and mess, but things that are of interest that help frame you out, right? I have some plants here. I'm in an office. I have some plants here. I have some wall hangings. You don't want to look like you are a hostage in a terrorist video, right? Where you're behind a blank white wall or whatever it is, and there is nothing there that gives any type of personality, that gives any type of warmth to your space. So in the same way that we were talking about strength and warmth and how you project, you want your space to also present warmth because it adds a calming element. So I would think about, when you're pulling up your Zoom, what your box looks like, and then what you can add in or where you can position your camera that allows you to be able to show some elements, some design elements, decor elements that are of interest. The other thing too is to make sure as well that you are having some books or anything that allows you to have some height with your computer. If you don't, then you end up either looking like this, somebody's looking up your nose. You don't want to do that. You want to be in a way where you are comfortably looking into the eye of the camera. So again, it's having some visual interests that are framing you, right? Not distracting, but are framing you, and then have lighting that is in your face, and then making sure that everything, around you is lit, 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 lit. That's all I can say. Proper lighting will get you through most things, but do not have just a blank wall behind you, because it looks like you should be holding up a newspaper that says what the date is so that people know you're safe. And that's not what we want.
In my defense, I will say I'm sort of doing the whiteboarding thing that like the UPS guy from those ads does. So it's a little different because I have this visual interest. Otherwise, my setup would kind of suck, because not only do I have the white thing, I have one thing in my background, and it's not just decorative. It's sort of like, ooh, what is that? And anytime that your audience spends saying, ooh, what is that? It's time they are not listening to you, which is the whole point of this. This is Nancy Pelosi giving Donald Trump what for around the table in the White House, in case you were curious. But like, if you're zooming in to figure that out, then you're totally not looking at what I'm saying. And can I just add just a moment of props to Danielle's setup here? It is so good. If you can do, there's backlighting, but she's got plenty of light in front of her. The depth and the like, there's things that are interesting, but they're not like, oh, I gotta know what that thing is. And the like cushy couch, like, I want to come over and we're gonna hang out and we're gonna sit on your couch, and it's just so warm. Like, this is like Room Raider 20. This is off the charts here. So one other thing too, notice that ring light. So the light that's lighting in his face is off axis. So it's not straight on. It just gives a little bit of visual interest. So it's not coming straight at, and you don't see the little circles in her eyes, but just a little bit off axis from the front. Just so good. So good. All right. We have like 0 minutes left, right? Do we want to talk about direct to camera, or forget slides? Do people use slides anymore? Don't use slides. Talk to the nice people.
Oh, wait, Nicole had a question in the corner, asking about, except for interviews, right? Job interviews, not media interviews. Should I have a blank wall? She's saying that all of the articles that she's reading recommend a blank wall. I'm going to disagree with those articles. I think that, especially if you're in a job interview and that is happening over Zoom, you want to show some personality and some interest. It's a wonderful way. If you have a bookshelf behind you, you have some of your favorite books out. It's a connection piece. Somebody can look at the book behind you and say, oh, I read such and such. What did you think about that? Absolutely. Again, you want to be able to add elements that make it feel like you're back in person, right? Yep. Without it being distracting.
100% with you. I don't know. Somebody's dashing off articles for clicks. Don't know what they're talking about. Forget it. Forget it. Coworkers that yell on Zoom. I don't know. Use your volume.
I'm like mute them.
Yeah.
We have 1 minute left, John.
And you do okay. The last thing I think we could possibly throw in here in 1 minute is that we have 0 minutes. Oh, direct camera. So a lot of the lessons that we've learned, which is that speaking naturally is something that you can do on camera, have to translate into any higher production videos or videos that we're making for social media or anything like that. We cannot do scripted video direct to camera unless we've internalized that script so much that it bursts from our soul supernaturally. People do not want to be read to from a script. They want to be talked to. And so there are a bunch of different ways to elicit that. But if it looks like a scripted presentation, you definitely should not be spending money on the production or the distribution of that. People will not buy it. So that's my 30-second sermon on direct to camera. How about that? Pretty good. Slide decks, email me. Good. And
that's it.
That's it. You're all good.
We hope that you all are ready to present for impact. This was super fun, and I really appreciate those of you who asked questions in the chats on the side. You made us feel like we were back in a room again without actually being back in a room. Hopefully next year.
Talking to ourselves, but yeah, maybe next year. So till next year, go out there, have some impact. God knows we need it.
God knows we need it. Good luck, everyone.
Take care.